In the heart of Accra, where the city buzzes with color and chaos, Zara starts a new chapter with her boyfriend. She's in her late 20s, an interior designer who works long hours turning dull rooms into beautiful spaces. Kwame, charming and confident, runs a small business and always talks big about success. When they move in together, he insists they split the rent and bills, even though Zara ends up paying most of it. She doesn't complain. She believes love means teamwork, and she wants peace more than arguments. Every morning, Zara wakes up early to cook breakfast, eggs sizzling, the smell of coffee filling their small kitchen. Kwame scrolls through his phone, half listening, before stepping out to meet his friends. Later, she hears him bragging loudly about his house and how well he takes care of his woman. His friends nod, impressed. Zara just smiles quietly, letting him have his moment. What no one knows is that the house they live in isn't Kwame's at all. It once belonged to Zara's late grandmother, the woman who raised her and taught her to stand on her own feet. The title deed is tucked safely in a drawer, in Zara's full name. She could correct him, but she doesn't. For now, she lets him play the part of the proud provider. Zara believes in timing, and while Kwame shows off, she knows something he doesn't. The perfect illusion is hers to control. At first, everything between Zara and Kwame seemed fine. A few laughs here, a few small arguments there. But with time, the cracks started to show. Kwame changed. The man who once praised Zara's ambition now rolled his eyes whenever she talked about work. If she came home late from a client meeting, he'd say things like, "You care more about those chairs and curtains than about me." When she landed a big project, instead of celebrating, he muttered, "You're getting too proud. You should act like a real girlfriend, not some boss lady." Slowly, his words chipped away at her peace. Kwame became more controlling, asking where she was, who she was with, and why she spent so much time designing other people's homes instead of cooking or cleaning. His friends stopped treating her like an equal too. When they came over, they'd leave dirty dishes everywhere, calling out, "Zara, can you bring us more drinks?" like she was their maid. She tried to stay calm, telling herself it would pass. But deep down, something inside her was breaking. One Friday night, Kwame decided to throw a small party at the house without even telling her. Zara came home tired, hoping for a quiet evening, only to find loud music, empty bottles, and strangers dancing on her living room rug. She pulled him aside, trying to talk. "Kwame, you should have told me. This is my home too," she said softly, hoping to keep things peaceful. He looked at her with a smirk and said, "Your home? You mean my house? You're just my tenant here, remember that." The room went silent in her mind. His friends kept laughing, music still played, but Zara's world froze for a moment. The words hit her harder than she expected. Tenant. After all she'd done, paying bills, cooking, supporting him, he saw her as nothing more than someone living under his roof. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stood there, heart heavy but eyes clear. For the first time, she saw him exactly as he was. Not a partner, not a protector, but a man hiding behind pride and ego. That night, when everyone finally left and the house went quiet again, Zara sat on the couch staring at the walls she'd once decorated with love. Every picture, every color, every little touch was hers, yet he had the audacity to claim it. That was the moment something shifted inside her. Zara realized the truth. Kwame didn't love her. He loved the control. He loved the image. And in his mind, she wasn't his equal. She was a prop in his story. But soon she knew the story was about to change. Zara didn't argue that night. After Kwame's harsh words, she simply walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The house felt different, heavy, cold, almost foreign. She stared at the walls she'd painted herself and wondered how love could turn so bitter. For a while, she thought about packing her bags, but then she stopped. Why should she be the one to leave her own home? The house was hers. Every brick, every tile, every inch of it. She spent the night in silence, thinking. Memories played in her mind, her grandmother's laughter echoing in the garden, the day she received the house keys after the funeral, the promise she made to protect what was left of her family's legacy. And now this man, the one she loved, was parading around like the owner. She realized she'd let him believe a lie for too long. The next morning, as sunlight slipped through the curtains, Zara picked up her phone and called Amma, her close friend and lawyer. "Amma," she said quietly, "can you double-check the property documents for me? The house at OSU. I want to make sure everything is still under my name." Amma, who already knew the situation, smiled through the phone. "Zara, that house is 100% yours. The land, the structure, everything. It was passed down to you legally, and the title deed carries only your name." "Why? Is something wrong?" Zara took a deep breath, her lips curling into a small, calm smile. "Nothing's wrong," she said softly. "I just needed to be sure. Maybe it's time he learned where he's really been living." Amma chuckled, half amused, half proud. "Take your time, but don't let him disrespect you like that again. You have the upper hand. Use it wisely." "I will," Zara replied. "But not yet. I want him to stay comfortable in his fantasy for a little while longer. After the call, Zara stood by the window, watching the city wake up. The noise of distant traffic, children laughing, and vendors calling out mixed with the soft morning breeze. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm. She realized that silence could be more powerful than shouting, and patience could sting louder than revenge. She made breakfast like usual, placed Kwame's plate on the table, and greeted him with a quiet smile. He didn't notice the change in her eyes. He still thought he was in control. But inside, Zara had already made a decision. The game was about to shift, and this time, she would move with grace, not anger. Let him boast, she thought. Let him keep thinking he owns this house. Because soon he'll find out the truth, and it'll shake his world more than any argument ever could. That weekend, Kwame decided to throw a celebration. He said it was just a small family gathering, but everyone who showed up soon realized it was more about showing off than anything else. Zara helped him set up the table, arranged the dishes, and made the living room look warm and inviting. She moved quietly, her calm smile never fading. Inside, she was watching everything carefully, like someone who already knew how the story would end. By noon, the house was full of laughter, loud music, and the smell of jollof rice. Kwame's relatives filled every corner, taking pictures and praising him for his beautiful home. He soaked it all in, standing tall with his arm around Zara, saying things like, "Yeah, I worked hard for this place. Built it from scratch with my own sweat." Zara just smiled, holding her cup of juice, pretending not to hear the lies. At one point, Kwame's mother pulled her aside and said with a gentle but proud tone, "My son is doing well, you know. You should appreciate what he provides. Not every man can give a woman a home like this." Zara nodded politely, her voice calm. "Yes, Mama. He's done well," she replied, though her eyes carried a quiet truth that no one else could read. As the evening went on, everyone laughed and toasted to Kwame's success. He was in his element, bragging about the renovations, the furniture, and how much the place had cost him. Zara stayed composed, clearing plates, refilling drinks, and keeping her phone close. Then, as the sun began to set and the room buzzed with chatter, her phone vibrated. She glanced down. A message from Alma lit up the screen. Property transfer update completed. All documents finalized. Zara's fingers lingered on the phone screen for a moment. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, quiet, powerful, and satisfying. The timing couldn't have been better. While Kwame bragged to his cousins about his house, the actual ownership had just been updated and legally confirmed in her name once again. Every record, every document, hers alone. She looked across the room at him, laughing loudly, full of himself. She took a slow sip of her drink and whispered under her breath, "Let's end this nicely." The night went on, but something in Zara's energy shifted. She no longer felt small or trapped. Every fake smile, every arrogant word he spoke, only made her stronger. She moved around the house like someone who had just reclaimed her power, even though no one else knew it yet. Kwame thought it was his big night. He had no idea it was actually hers. By the time the guests left and the house grew quiet again, Zara knew exactly what came next, and it would be calm, clean, and unforgettable. The next morning started like any other, except Zara already knew it wouldn't end the same. The house still carried the leftover noise from the night before. Empty bottles on the counter, laughter from Kwame's relatives in the living room, and Kwame himself barking orders like a king in his castle. Zara moved quietly around the kitchen, frying eggs and toasting bread, keeping her calm as always. Then it started. "Zara, what's taking so long?" Kwame shouted from the dining area. "You can't even make breakfast on time?" His relatives chuckled, whispering to each other. Zara didn't respond. She kept her focus on the pan, her face calm but her heart steady with purpose. Kwame raised his voice again, louder this time, making sure everyone heard. "I swear, sometimes you forget your place. You're just a tenant here. Remember that." The room went silent for a second before his relatives burst out laughing, thinking it was just another joke at her expense. Zara turned slowly, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked directly at him, her tone soft but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Oh, really?" she said. "Then as your landlord, I'll have to ask you to move out." The laughter stopped instantly. Kwame blinked, confused, unsure if he heard her right. His mother's smile faded. "What did you say?" Kwame asked, half laughing, trying to keep his pride. Zara didn't answer with words at first. She walked calmly to the drawer by the TV stand, opened it, and pulled out a brown envelope. She placed it gently on the table in front of him. "Go ahead," she said. "Read it." Kwame frowned, still pretending to be amused. But as he unfolded the papers, his hands started to shake. There it was, the title deed, the official property document, printed clearly with one name in bold, Zara Mensah. He read it once, then again, hoping it was a mistake. His relatives leaned over his shoulder, their faces draining of color. This can't be real," Kwame stammered, looking up at her with disbelief. "Oh, it's very real," Zara replied calmly. You've been living in my house, Kwame. The house my grandmother left me. The house I paid to maintain. The house you love to brag about. No one moved. The only sound was the quiet clatter of the spoon she set down on the counter. Kwame's mother looked embarrassed, his cousins avoided eye contact, and Kwame just sat there, speechless, humiliated, stripped of the illusion he'd built around himself. Zara didn't yell, didn't gloat. She just stood tall, her voice even. Breakfast's ready, she said, turning back to the stove. But you might want to start packing after you eat. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting could ever be. For a long moment, the room stayed frozen. Kwame just stared at the papers on the table, his mouth open but no words coming out. His face shifted from shock to anger, then to embarrassment. His relatives sat in awkward silence, glancing between him and Zara, not sure what to say. Finally, Kwame spoke, his voice trembling with pride and frustration. This doesn't mean anything, he said quickly. I paid for the renovations. The paint, the tiles, the new furniture. It's technically mine too. Zara turned to face him, her expression calm and unreadable. She tilted her head slightly, then let out a soft, tired laugh. Technically, she repeated. Kwame, love was never a rental. You just didn't own your part. Her words cut deeper than any argument could. Kwame's relatives exchanged glances, uncomfortable. The woman they had mocked just stood there, unshaken, composed, and in full control. Zara reached into a folder on the counter and pulled out another envelope, this one stamped and signed. She walked over and placed it gently in front of him. That's an eviction notice, she said quietly. Prepared and signed by my lawyer, You have 7 days to move out. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Kwame's mother started gathering her purse, whispering, Let's go, to one of the cousins. The others quickly followed, mumbling excuses as they headed for the door. No one wanted to stay and witness what came next. Kwame stood there, gripping the papers, his face red with humiliation. You think you're better than me now, he shouted suddenly. You'll regret this, Zara. You'll see. No one will ever treat you like I did. Zara didn't even flinch. She calmly wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and met his angry gaze with steady eyes. That's the point, Kwame, she said softly. No one ever will. He threw the papers onto the table, knocking over a cup in the process. Water spilled across the surface, but Zara didn't move to clean it up. She just stood there, strong and still, watching as he stomped toward the door. His pride was in pieces, and all his confidence had vanished. He slammed the door behind him, his voice echoing from outside. You'll regret this. The sound faded down the street until there was nothing left but quiet. Zara stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the silence. For the first time in months, it felt like the house could breathe again. The air was lighter, the tension gone. She picked up the damp eviction papers from the table, set them aside, and took a deep breath. Kwame had left chaos behind, but what he didn't know was that peace was already moving in. Zara didn't need to shout or gloat. She had done what her grandmother would have wanted, protected what was hers with grace and strength. The days after Kwame left felt like the first breath after a storm. The house, once heavy with tension and noise, suddenly felt calm. The silence that used to scare Zara now felt peaceful, like the walls were finally exhaling with. She woke up one morning, looked around the room, and decided it was time to start fresh. She began with the little things. His clothes gone, his cologne on the dresser tossed, the framed pictures of them smiling, now replaced with her design sketches and a few photos of her grandmother. She gathered everything that reminded her of him into a box, carried it outside, and left it by the gate. When she came back in, the air already felt different, lighter. Next came the walls. Zara bought cans of paint, warm cream, soft gold, a touch of olive green, colors that made her feel alive again. With music playing softly in the background, she painted every corner herself, humming as she worked. The brush strokes felt like therapy. With every layer, she erased a bit of the past and created space for something new. Once the painting was done, she rearranged the furniture. The couch faced the window now, the curtains were brighter, and the house finally looked like her. She opened the windows wide, letting the sunlight flood in, the smell of fresh paint mixing with the sound of her favorite old-school Ghanaian song. Soon, her living room turned into more than just a home. It became her little studio. Zara set up a desk by the window with her design samples, color swatches, and fabric rolls. She began hosting clients right there, using the space as a reflection of her creativity and strength. People loved it. They said the place had soul. Her friends started visiting too. They brought snacks, laughter, and warmth. The first time they came over after Kwame's exit, they couldn't stop teasing her. Girl, one of them laughed. You really evicted your own man. That's next-level boss move. Zara chuckled, pouring everyone a drink. No, she said with a calm smile. I just took back what was mine. The room erupted in laughter, but behind her smile was something deeper, pride, relief, and peace. As the night went on, they talked about life, work, and love. For the first time in a long while, Zara felt free. Not because she had kicked someone out, but because she had finally chosen herself. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of everything she'd overcome. When her friends left and the house went quiet again, she stood in the middle of the room, looking around. The space felt alive, peaceful, warm, and completely hurt. And this time, Zara wasn't just living in the house. She was living in her truth. A month passed, and life had finally found its rhythm again. Zara's days were full, clients visiting her home studio, friends dropping by with food and laughter, and evenings filled with soft music and peace. The house that once felt like a battlefield now felt like a sanctuary. She didn't think about Kwame much anymore. If anything, she hoped he'd learned something and moved on with his life. One quiet Saturday afternoon, as Zara watered the plants on her porch, she heard a knock at the gate. When she opened it, her heart gave a small jolt. There he was. Kwame. But not the proud, confident man she remembered. This version looked tired and worn down. His shirt was wrinkled, his beard overgrown, and the spark in his eyes was gone. "Zara," he started softly, forcing a weak smile. "Can we talk?" She didn't say anything, just nodded slightly and stepped aside. He walked into the compound slowly, looking around like he was revisiting an old dream. The freshly painted walls, the rearranged furniture, the calm energy. It was nothing like the home he once ruled over. He sat on the edge of the couch while she stood across the room, arms folded. "I've been going through a lot," he said, his voice cracking a little. "Business isn't doing well. My friends turned their backs on me, and I lost my apartment. I just need a place to stay for a while, just until I get back on my feet." Zara watched him quietly. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, quiet understanding, but also firm boundaries. He kept talking, trying to sound sincere. "You know me, Zara. You know I can bounce back. Just give me a little time here, please." For a moment, the old Zara, the one who used to forgive easily, who always wanted peace, flickered inside her. But then she remembered everything. The disrespect, the arrogance, the words that still echoed. "You're just my tenant." She took a slow breath and finally spoke. "Kwame," she said calmly, "you treated me like a tenant in my own house. So now go find another landlord." The silence that followed was heavy. Kwame blinked, stunned, as if he couldn't believe what he just heard. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Zara walked to the door, opened it gently, and stepped aside. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. He stood there, speechless, his pride completely gone. The woman in front of him wasn't the one he used to control or talk down to. This was a woman who had reclaimed her power, her home, and her peace. Zara closed the door slowly, the latch clicking into place like a final chapter closing. Outside, Kwame stood staring at the house for a few seconds before walking away, shoulders slumped. Inside, Zara turned back toward her bright, peaceful living room, the space that was hers and hers alone, and smiled. She didn't need to look back anymore. Weeks turned into months, and life kept getting brighter for Zara. The house that once carried the weight of heartbreak now buzzed with creativity and purpose. What started as a small studio in her living room grew into something bigger, a full-blown business she proudly called Zara Design Studio. Word spread quickly around Accra. Clients loved her sense of style and her calm confidence. Soon, her calendar was packed with interior design projects, and her phone never stopped ringing. But what made Zara happiest wasn't just the success. It was what the space represented. Every corner of the house told her story: strength, growth, and freedom. She turned the old guest room into a workshop filled with fabrics, color samples, and vision boards. The garden became an outdoor meeting space where she'd sit with clients over chilled sabalo and talk ideas. People loved coming there. They said the energy felt warm, safe, and inspiring. And maybe that's because it carried a woman's quiet resilience in every wall and color. Before long, local magazines started noticing her. One journalist wrote an article titled, "The Woman Who Took Back Her Home and Built an Empire Inside It." It went viral. Women across the city began reaching out to her, asking for advice. Not just about design, but about standing up for themselves, managing money, and knowing their worth. Zara began mentoring a few of them. Every Saturday, she'd gather young women in her studio to talk about business, budgeting, and confidence. She shared her story, not with bitterness, but with honesty. "You don't need to wait for someone to validate you," she told them. "Own your space in every sense of the word." Soon, she was invited to local radio shows and interviews. When asked about her success, she always smiled and said, "It's not about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It's about remembering who you are and what you deserve." Her calm strength made her a favorite guest, not loud, not boastful, but deeply real. One quiet evening, after a long day at work, Zara stood in her living room, now beautifully transformed with plants, art, and light. She picked up a framed photo of her grandmother, wiped the glass gently, and placed it on the wall above her desk. the same desk where she signed her first big contract. Looking at the photo, her eyes softened. "You taught me well, Nana," she whispered. The house stayed in the right hands. The wind rustled the curtains, and for a moment, it felt like her grandmother's spirit was right there with her, proud, smiling, at peace. Zara turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of her studio sign, Zara Designs Studio. It wasn't just a name on a wall. It was a symbol of everything she had built: her home, her independence, and her new beginning. Morning light spilled gently across the garden, catching the gold letters on the new signboard, Zara Designs HQ. The flowers were in full bloom, the air smelled of fresh paint and jasmine, and Zara walked slowly through the path she'd planted herself. Her steps were steady, her smile calm, a woman fully at peace in her space. She paused by the front gate, admiring the sign for a moment. The same house that once held arguments and pride now stood as a symbol of freedom and success. Every brick carried her story, not of heartbreak, but of rebuilding. She looked around, taking it all in: the clean walls, the sound of soft music drifting from inside, and the quiet hum of her life moving forward. As she turned to go back inside, a car pulled up. A woman stepped out, folder in hand, and smiled. "Hi, are you Zara? I heard you're the best in the business. I'd love for you to design my new office." Zara smiled back, extending her hand warmly. "You came to the right place," she said. Her voice was confident, sure, no trace of the woman who once doubted her own worth. And as the two walked toward the front door, a gentle voiceover played in the background. "He said I was just a tenant, but you can't evict the owner of her own destiny." The camera would follow her as she opened the door, light flooding the studio filled with color, laughter, and dreams. Zara glanced once more at her grandmother's photo on the wall and whispered, "We did it." Because this wasn't just a comeback, it was a rebirth. Never let someone convince you that you're small in a place you built with your own strength.